And then we have people who are coming in today from the Middle East, from North Africa, parts of Africa, who don't have that worldview. So Nick says there's a problem here, but he doesn't really correlate what the issue is. The issue is not the race, skin color. It's the worldview as to what they believe. Hey, my name is Steve Hinton, and I serve as a pastor and author.
And I'm your co-host, Matthias. I serve as a personal trainer and a volunteer at my local church. Join us now for another episode of The Man Identity. Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of the episode we did last week about talking about Nick Fuentes and and all the issues that young men are facing kind of here in the big 2026. So we're back talking a little bit more about it. We talked last time about kind of more so the issues that young men are facing. And today we kind of want to address, where people like Nick Fuentes are getting it right, maybe where he's getting it wrong, and then also maybe kind of how we can address these issues from a more, mature biblical perspective.
I like the word mature.
Yeah. So, because, people can be right, but they may not go about it in the right way.
Yes.
So, Steve, how do you want to start this off?
Matthias. Well, we had talked about this a couple times during the week, and number one, I just want our audience, the folks listening to the podcast and those online, just thank you. We're looking for your comments. We want to address your questions. I also want you to know that I am not an expert at all on a lot of this, and also just the truth of the matter is that this is not the only gig that you and I have.
Right.
You're doing what you're doing, and I am. So it's not as though I've had a ton of time to put into this. The few Joe Rogan podcasts that I've seen on YouTube, he's talking with somebody, but he always has somebody in the background on the computer. Mm-hmm. So if he forgets something, somebody can type it up real quick and
pull it up. Yeah, we don't have a team. It's just us.
We do not have a team yet. So I don't want to come across as an expert in all this, but we had an opportunity last week to really listen to some of your thoughts, Matthias, and I wanted to do that. I mean, I can even think about my own life when I was a younger man and trying to unpack something or understand that, and talking to someone who was older, and they didn't even give me the time of day.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to do today is to maybe look at another side of the coin. One of the things that I thought about as I listened to Nick, and I looked at, and I did, Matthias, from the very first one that you gave me, where Tucker, Carlton or Carlson, I can't remember, is interviewing him, and I listened to that, and I listened to a lot over the past few weeks, but I haven't been able to do it all. But being able to step back and say, okay, here's a perspective from somebody who's been down the road. Mm-hmm. And I think back to episode number 7, and Dr. Brian, and he talked about someone who's been down the river. They can tell you where the boulders are, because sometimes as a younger man, you can't see these things. Now, that also made me think of, Nick in general. I don't know about you, Matthias, but I look at Nick and I look at a guy who's really smart.
Yeah.
I made the observation last week that he kind of made me think of, an Andrew Tate, but an educated Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
But I also look at Nick and I just didn't see a teachable guy. Mm-hmm. I see a guy who's always talking and not listening. And for me, that's a red flag. I see a guy who knows a lot, but is only giving the data that fits his narrative. Mm. In one of the videos, Nick referred to himself as being a truth teller. And I thought, well, you're telling the truth, but not all the truth. It reminded me of Al Gore in the 90s, where he put out a video about, it was called global warming at the time. And he put out a video called the inconvenient truth. And his drive was, here's the inconvenient truth that we don't want to recognize, that if we don't do anything in 25 years, the world's going to melt, and that, didn't happen.
Right.
And I thought about that because I felt like Nick is giving the truth. Some of it's very true, but it was like the convenient truth that fits his narrative. But I think a big thing when I listen to Nick, and not just Nick, that I just don't see the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and I just don't see any hope. He's standing up. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. These people are bad. This is a bad position. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And like, well, okay, I'm going to go drive my car into the river because everything's so bad. Jesus came and he said that I came that you might have life and have it to the fullest. And that is the message of what authentic Christianity is about. And one of the things that we want to do in the man identity is to encourage guys, but to encourage them, we got to give them, some purpose, something to live up to. So, I mean, you asked the question, what does Nick say that was right? So let me just give you some things that I think of, and you can let me know if that's about accurate or not. So one thing that comes to mind, and it's not just Nick that is saying this, that we've had a culture for the past 20 years that is canceling anything that doesn't fit the narrative that Hollywood wants, that liberal politics and social media want. There's a cancellation, and even to the point of, in particular, white males who have a Christian world view. They're shot down immediately. Critical race theory. If you're a white guy,
you're basically one bad day away from being Hitler to anybody who's
exactly. And so Nick is pushing back against that, and so culture's relaxed a little bit. We're not hearing as much about toxic masculinity. So I think Nick is right that's an issue that we need to address. And I mean, it even affects boys in our culture today. Yeah. And that's been going on for a while. I remember my oldest son, when he was in the first grade, public school cafeteria, and he had a sandwich, and he chewed the sandwich into the shape of a gun. And, some of the teachers' aides got onto him. And I don't know if he got sent to the office or not, but, that sort of thing. I don't know why this is so big with Nick, but he's talked a lot about Israel. And there is this issue that a lot of voices are saying today that you must, it is required that you give immediate and unconditional support to the state of Israel in everything you do. And if you don't do that, well, then you hate Jews. And I think that's a bad thing, because there are things that are going on there. There are Christians who have been persecuted in Israel and Gaza. So I think Nick is on to that. The problem is, what does he do from that point on? And we'll come to that. There are issues that he talks about, what we've received from the boomer generation. And I don't know if we talked about this last week or not, but I'm kind of in between. I was born in 1969. I'm not really a boomer, but I'm not really an Xer either. But you think back to the boomer, and there's an interesting thing. It was kind of touched on. There was a movie that came out about, a couple of years ago, called Ford versus Ferrari. And one of the executives was talking about the fact that this is the first generation, the children of the World War II people that have money in their pockets. They have money in their pockets, and they don't want to drive dad's old sedan or whatever. So it was kind of a generation that said, hey, we're going to get, that they were children in the Great Depression, like little children or whatever, or their parents. So now it was a generation of, it's all about us. It's all about us. Well, like I've said before, that there are so many issues that it's like the proverbial, which layer of the onion are we pulling out right now? Right. One of the issues in the boomer generation that has come down to Gen X a little bit is that we have less families. We have less larger families. And so we're talking about, the population decrease in America. And, one of the suggestion is, well, we need more immigration. Well, okay. The other suggestion is, well, we just have big families again. And part of the problem that we see in our culture today is big families is looked down on.
It's not even that. I mean, it is that, but I think it's also just people really don't, either they've been sold a lie that we can't afford it, or we genuinely feel like we can't afford it. Like, I've got 2 kids now, and I don't know how I'd afford having any more.
Right.
Any minor inconvenience I kind of go through in my home or anything like that, I'm like, oh man, I got to get this one thing fixed. So I've become kind of a well-rounded handyman because it costs a lot less. Anyways, didn't mean to sidetrack you there, but I want to say that's also kind of an issue
for your generation.
Yeah, for my generation.
Yeah, and we could talk about that more later, but it does raise the questions of what is it that we need to have? I mean, when we were growing up, we have 4 kids, and our kids never had the latest stuff. And I'm not saying that that's something you do for your kids, but how much do we really need to have? And then, yes, there is this reality. You know, Nick's right about this, that the cost has come up for years, and what do we do about that? But then it's not only the cost, but there's this idea that children are a burden. Children are a burden. Well, you know, when they wake up at 3 a.m, they're a burden. But do we look at children as a burden, or do we look at children as an investment that we are investing our love into these kids, and they're going to grow up and they're going to add to the culture today? You know, Nick's got a point. This is a big thing for Nick as well, and for others, the whole immigration thing. And part of the problem is if you say something against immigration, you're immediately tagged a racist or something like that.
Bigot, racist,
exactly.
Anything under the sun that they'll throw at you.
Right. And you know that's something. And I want to talk about Nick here in a little bit on how he takes it too far. But okay, so what is the truth? That we do have people coming into our country who have no desire
to assimilate.
Yeah. Not only that, they have no desire to add to what is good here.
Right.
And it's a worldview issue.
It's like if we were to go to, let's say, a very culturally rich country like Japan, and then kind of move there and expect not to assimilate to their customs. If you go anywhere that it's like very known, like there's a specific kind of people there and a specific kind of culture, and you don't even contribute, well, you're trying to enjoy the fruits of something that you didn't produce and also not give back.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what's going on is there's mass migration going on. People aren't assimilating, kind of forming their own communities, bringing kind of the communities they had where they came from instead of assimilating to the values that we have here.
Right.
And so that's kind of the issue.
Well, it's that, and it's also a worldview issue.
Right.
And Nick gets this messed up a lot when he talks about race. He gets it messed up a lot. But when you have somebody coming in with an Islamic worldview, they don't understand where Jesus said, you know, do to others what you would have them do to you. You know, that doesn't mean anything to an atheist. That doesn't mean anything to a Muslim who believes that we have to obey Allah and we have to take the world over for Allah. You know, so it doesn't fit well. So we have to address the issue. And I think one of the big things again with Nick, he makes these comments, but they're half comments, and then he doesn't give any hope on what we're to do with it. You know, I think looking at some of the things that are wrong, you know, the whole Israel thing, and I see the angst and I see some things, but again, that there are issues that aren't completely right. There was an episode, you sent me an episode a while back, a 10-part series that Nick's having with Joel
Webbin.
Yeah, Joel Webbin. And I don't know much about the guy. I see some red flags, but the whole issue was on Israel or most of it. And for example, Nick brought up the 1967 Six-Day War. And he told part of it, but the way he told the narrative was in such a way that Israel was 100% the aggressor. So the war went down early June of 1967. But Nick didn't talk about the fact that in May, it was Egypt that blocked off the Strait of Tiran or something like that. Can't remember all the specific data. In other words, Egypt is pushing against Israel and saying, we're not going to let you do trade, and we're taking aggressions here. Well, you know, Nick left all that out. And then 2 or 3 minutes into his discussion, he made the statement that, well, Israel's going to go double or nothing and attack Syria as well. He didn't mention the fact that Syria started bombing Israel before Israel responded to that. So I guess the point there is that Nick, he's making statements, but they're not 100% true. And again, there's this balance of, okay, yeah, there's an issue here that we can look at the, you know, they have a theological bent toward it, that because of God's promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, that we must politically support unconditionally Israel today because of that. And I think that doesn't follow. But then Nick carries it to another realm. He and Joel started talking about the Holocaust, and Nick made a comment about so the story goes, implying that the Holocaust didn't really happen. And then as you unpack that a little bit more, and this is where I was kind of getting a little angry, Joel Weber started likening Hitler to Napoleon. And I thought, oh my goodness, you can't make that connection at all. Was Napoleon wanting to take over Europe? Yes. Was Napoleon wanting to do this? Yes. Did Napoleon round up the Jews and try to do the final solution to get rid of them? No, he didn't want to do that. So there was an issue there, and just the way Nick talks about some of these things, he made a comment a couple times about how Hitler was cool, and then he tried to justify it later on, and he started talking about the optics of it. In other words, you can look at these movies and the original stormtroopers.
Yeah.
The stormtroopers before Star Wars, and for a kid, boy, that's pretty cool. You got these tough soldiers marching on and da 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 da. But maybe that's the point. That's a comment that a kid can make. Mm. A kid can go, "Hey, those soldiers are cool," but for an adult who thinks through these things, it's just not mature. He made a comment in the Tucker Carlson interview, and I don't know why Tucker didn't jump on this. Maybe this is why people canceled Tucker, because he didn't jump on this. But Nick said, yeah, he's kind of a fan of Stalin. Mm-hmm. And later on, he in another interview, he tried to justify that by saying that, well, it was Stalin that drug Russia into the industrial age. Well, he drug Russia into the industrial age by causing this famine in Ukraine, where he was forcing farmers to take all these fields, plant all this grain, harvest everything, send it to the factories, and there's just starvation after starvation. So he's just not being responsible in what he's thinking there. I think going back to the whole race thing, he even said, I don't know which interview it was, that he was radicalized by race and that he was pro-white. And his angle is, well, he's making a comparison between the immigrants that came into America 100 years ago. We had the immigrants from Germany, from Ireland, from England, from France, from Europe. And they came with a worldview of, the Statue of Liberty, and we're the poor, and we're gonna invest, and we're gonna do all this. And well, they were from Europe. You're right, they were white. And then we have all these immigrants who are coming in now from Islamic countries, North African countries, and well, they're not white. Okay, Nick, the problem is not that one's white and one's black. The problem is the worldview that these immigrants that came in, they came in with a general biblical worldview that there is a God, the God of the Bible. And I mean, I know God, but I'm gonna honor God. I'm gonna reverence God. And I'm going to work for the good of this Constitution that says we are endowed by our Creator and we're created equal. Okay, there's a worldview there.
Yeah.
And then we have people who are coming in today from the Middle East, from North Africa, parts of Africa, who don't have that worldview. So Nick says there's a problem here, but he doesn't really correlate what the issue is. The issue is not the race, skin color. It's the worldview as to what they believe. So I think there's some things that Nick is off.
I think there's two issues here, and I think he's kind of combining both. I think one of the issues that he's kind of really, and I don't think they should be combined. I think one of them is the being called a bigot, racist kind of issue. One of them is, well, how come every other nation, ethnicity can be proud to be that? But if you say that as a white person, well, you're basically if you're not guided correctly in this life by other people, other groups, you will basically become the next Hitler. Is kind of the in one of the episodes they referred to it as the post-war. I'm not a history buff, so I have no idea.
Well, it's this idea of
Post-war consensus.
Yeah, the post-war consensus. And you're right. The idea is if you resemble authoritarianism or authority, if you resemble authority in any way and you happen to be white, you got to stop because you might be the next Hitler.
Right.
I'm like, what?
Right. So I think he's combining that issue with the immigration issue.
Right.
So I think
he does, and there's probably, you're probably right that there's some.
I'm not saying those should be combined, because I think you're absolutely right that it's a worldview issue. People immigrating here in mass instead of assimilating to the Christian worldviews and values that, we can discuss and debate, how they've gone downhill since secular humanism has really taken over and taken control of the government and influenced it. But I would say, there's an issue with this not assimilating to the fruits of what the Christian worldview has brought in this nation over the last few hundred years.
Well, and see that, and part of that is not just, again, I think if Nick can just get some wisdom, and if he can just calm down, just get some wisdom, because all this is true, but it's deeper than this. And one of the things I've said in all of our episodes is this idea of balance. It's not just a Christian worldview versus an Islamic worldview, but even an atheistic worldview. And going back to what came from the West, there's a book, I don't know if I mentioned it last episode, or I know I have in the past, Rodney Stark, How the West Won. Rodney was actually originally not a historian. He died about 10 years ago. He was a sociologist, wasn't actually a Christian, but he just did the study. Why is it that things developed in Europe like no other place?
Yeah.
Did not develop in Asia, did not develop in South America, did not develop in Africa. It's because there was a Christian worldview. We talked about this a little bit.
One of our episodes.
Yeah. Right. Justin Brierley. But Nick's not connecting. He knows there's something there, but the wisdom's not allowing him to connect the dots, that there is this worldview that God created me. I'm created in his image. Therefore, I have creativity, but I'm responsible to use that. So I'm implementing these things in my life, my faith, into my practice, which affects the science, which affects the way I treat other people. I mean, the idea of value, human value, that comes from Christ.
Comes from, a Christian worldview.
Right. It doesn't come from an atheistic worldview.
Well, because atheists have to borrow from worldviews too.
Yeah,
we won't get into that, but
well, and see that's true. That the atheist that would say, and I mentioned my, the angry atheist that's always dogging me. They'll talk about absolute truth, but they don't connect the dots that the only reason we have the idea of an absolute truth is because there is an absolute God.
Right.
And they're functioning with some resemblance of truth because of the past 400 years.
Yeah.
Past 500-600 years out of Europe. So on the one hand, Nick is right. Hey, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. But when he says things like I've become radicalized by race and I'm pro-white, he's missing the point, in my opinion. So, and we'll get to what do we need to do about all these things in a moment. But so I think again, there's some things that he's saying that are right, but they're not quite.
There's no precision.
Yeah, you said that earlier, and I think that's a good way to look at it. There's no precision in what he's saying. So again, I look at it and I think, okay, I think of Adonijah, 1 Kings chapter 1, who had all of this privilege, had all of this knowledge, had all of this whatever, but he wasn't teachable. And I just don't sense that in Nick. So where do we go from here? What are some other questions?
Yeah, I think a big thing would be okay, well, if being a passive Christian or just passive, even if you're not a Christian, but you're against kind of like the downhill slope you've seen the U.S. kind of go in, and, you see people like Nick making a difference, being, lacking precision, lacking some wisdom, but still being bold and kind of in your face about things. And you see that that's kind of working. but you know that there might be better ways to approach that with more precision, with your wording and with some more wisdom. If that's not the only way to go about it, what is the correct biblical kind of way we should think about going about making change?
Yeah. Part of it is I'm thinking about it. I've got the book right here. One of my friends recommended this to me several months ago, and I read it together with a group of other pastors, but Leadership and Emotional Sabotage. And I actually have the author lined up to interview the end of March unless something comes in. But as I read that, I thought, okay, he's describing our culture, but how we should better respond to it.
Yeah.
And he does a good job of describing the culture. And again, there are all these deep issues that I don't think Nick, and I'm getting to your question, that Nick doesn't get. And one of those issues, and it's really described in that, he uses different verbiage, different words. But what we have in our culture, and we've been growing to this for the past generation, is a rejection of God and a rejection of authority.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to the 10 Commandments, we don't want the 10 Commandments. Okay, maybe we want the last 4. Maybe the last 4. Okay, the last 5. But we don't want,
the first half.
We don't want the first one. Okay, well, the part of the first one is addressing God. Right. Now, so we're going to remove God, and then we're going to, by doing that, we really remove authority. Honor your father and mother. Okay? We get to a culture where we're no longer honoring father and mother. We're no longer honoring authority in general. So we have a collapse of culture. Everybody just does what they want to. Okay. The connection to all that being, the author talks about how do we respond? And part of it is he talks about sabotage. And sabotage is anything that gets us off mission. Mm-hmm. So you and I are called to live as, live with purpose, live as men of God. Well, there are a lot of ways to sabotage, to get us off mission. And it's interesting. One of the things that I've heard people say about Nick, and okay, so you've called us racist, you've called us bigot, you've called us all this sort of stuff. Okay, by golly, we're just going to do it. Mm-hmm. We're just going to be a jerk. Okay. Both of those are getting us off purpose. So if somebody cancels us, we get off purpose. We're not going to do it. Well, if we turn around and we're just toxic, we're also off purpose as well. So, and part of it's the timing. And I am going to get there, but I think about it, Nick, again. I was listening to another interview that you sent me. He was being interviewed by a younger guy, somebody about his age. Some pastor or something.
Was he in a suit?
Yeah.
I think that was Jack Neal.
Okay, Jack Neal. And again, Nick went on about, I was canceled. Yeah, I was canceled. Yeah, I was canceled. And I thought, okay, we've heard that a billion times. Mm. We've heard that a billion times. There was a show that came on. I didn't see a lot of the episodes. I think it was maybe even on cable, called Duck Dynasty. It had a good season, 2 or 3 seasons. But the lead guy, the father, Phil Robertson of the family, he made some kind of comment about homosexuals, mm-hmm. and the show got canceled. Mm-hmm. Well, Phil Robertson said, well, okay, what's next? And his son and his brother, and, it was like, okay, well, that's done. What I think part of the deal is, to your question, what do we do? Well, I think number one, we have to think in mature terms. In other words, I'm not going to be the victim.
Right.
I'm not going to be the victim. I'm not going to play the victim card. I'm not going to accept what you're saying about me. I'm not going to be a jerk, but I am going to stand up. I am going to stand up and I am going to say, okay, well, this is what Jesus said. Take it or leave it. I'm not going to beat you over the head with it, but I'm not going to back up either.
Yeah.
So part of it would be, beginning in the microcosm, living my life. I'm just starting here. I'm not, we will get to that place, but in my own life that I find out who I am, creating the image of God. I find out how I'm made. I find out what God's word is, and I just start living that. And sometimes the biggest way we can change culture is by one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we get into, we want to speak the truth. Well, the Bible tells us we are to speak the truth in love.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible says that we are to keep our head. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5, keep your head in all situations. Going back to episode number 1, that poem that was written by the British guy, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you and da-da-da-da-da, and you'll be, a man, my son. So what I've seen is, and this is the why, trying to debate on Facebook or whatever, it's just useless.
Yeah, it's the biggest waste of time.
It is, because people, part of what they're doing is they don't want to look dumb.
Right.
Everybody's watching, and so I'm going to, even if I might be wrong, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight. So learning how to keep my head, learning how to think through things. So we hear something and we have a knee-jerk reaction. And I'm thinking about 2 issues on the left. A few years ago, George Floyd. He was the black man up in wherever that was, Minneapolis. I can't even remember now. And he was resisting arrest, and an officer put a hold on him, and he died. And even a bunch of Christians immediately said, "Oh, I can't breathe. I can't breathe." That whatever the bandwagon was at the time. Now, I didn't study this enough. If the guy was using, more aggression as a police officer than he should have, I don't know. I wasn't in it. But the point is, a lot of people immediately jumped on that bandwagon until all the data was in, and the reality was, well, he was high, he was resisting arrest, and this issue and this issue and this issue, and part of the problem again was, oh, you're not defending the guy, so you must be racist.
Right.
Well, no, that's not true. Here's an immediate example, and I don't know everything. I'm trying to keep my focus because, I admitted last week, I can go down these angst, hallways myself and lose time. But the male nurse up in
the one that happened just recently.
Yeah, just recently. And, the immediate narrative is he was this peaceful protester, and people are celebrating him and all this sort of stuff. Okay, now the other data is coming in. Well, the additional data is that, well, he had a history himself of being violent. He had assaulted police officers, a week ago. He came with a loaded weapon. The point being, okay, what do we do? Well, to begin with, we got to keep our head. Mm-hmm. We need to wait, and this is left and right. I would say this to the left. I would say this to the right. Wait till we have all the data until we make these knee-jerk reactions. Then go look for the data. Mm-hmm. In other words, instead of just being in my own little box, go look for the data. And then when I begin to talk about it, make educated arguments. Mm-hmm. In other words, there is an issue. Instead of just going off the handle and using, because Nick cusses a lot. Yeah. Using cuss words, using derogatory words. I mean, going back to the first episode that you gave me, Nick called somebody a douchebag, and I thought, okay, wait, really? So making the point clear, and then just standing. And I'm not responsible for what somebody else does. Mm-hmm. I don't have to wait until they respond. This is the truth. Here it is. And not being responsive. So to boldly say, this is the truth, and then being calm about it, doing the homework, getting the information, having the emotional control, having a high emotional IQ, that I'm not triggered by what's going on, having the data right, the facts straight, and trying to stay on focus, and then living right. One of the things that we try to do in the podcast is to call up young men and say, hey, we believe in you. You can do this. Yeah. But part of calling up, thinking in the realm of a coach, is to say, okay, I need you to do something here that may be uncomfortable. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes, guys, you need to do the tough stuff.
Yeah,
I get it. There are a lot of things that stink right now. We want to encourage you. But Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I was talking with my little brother a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the economy now, and he's in real estate. He also does ministry. And so he's very aware of the house prices and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But we both concurred that despite how bad it is right now, it's not as bad as what it was in 1938, with the Great Depression and things of that nature. So part of it is, okay, I get it. Now, guys, I want to encourage you. You can do this now. Get up and go do it. There's something honorable about having a job.
Yeah.
May not be the job you want. You know what? I've done jobs in my life that I just don't want to do. But I want to encourage you to do that job anyway. I don't know what Nick does. He's got this, really cool podcast, and so he's getting money somehow.
I was going to say, I think this is his only job.
Right. All that to say is there's a part of me that's like, yeah, do you know what it is to work 9 to 5? So the point is, we were created to work, and there's honor in that. So get a job, find a wife. And Nick talked about, one of his episodes, he talked about being able to find the peak of manhood where he doesn't need a woman. Okay, I understand that there's that angle of, I want to be emotionally healthy in the sense that I don't need a woman to affirm me.
Yeah.
I want to, but at the same time, the truth is, being married actually makes you a better man.
Right. I think that just comes from the Catholic worldview.
Yeah.
That's what he is. So
yeah,
I think because they take that the passage talking about Paul where he says, if it's better to be alone or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's that's his worldview. But yes, I would agree with you. Being married, and I think God's gonna use different people in your life for different reasons. But yes, definitely marrying a woman does make you a better man.
And then to have children as well.
Yeah.
And part of the deal is, and I'm guilty of this too, but a lot of times we want immediate reactions. We want immediate fruit. Well, where we are today didn't just happen when Trump got elected.
Right.
What we have today is the product of decades. Now God can move in and bring revival.
Right.
And we've seen some of that. We've seen a lot of young men come to think about faith again, to see the bankruptcy of living without faith. So God can bring revival. We've seen that. The first and second Great Awakening in America, the Welsh revival in the UK. We see this, but a lot of times it comes because men were deliberate.
Yeah,
I'm going to deliberately invest in my wife, in my kids, in my church, in my community, and see that has ripple effects.
Yeah,
that affects my children. That affects the children coming behind me, the people in my community. And again, one of the things that, I touched on this, I listened to Nick and I listened to some of these guys, and it's like, man, just end it all. But there's this hope that if we do stand, Matthias, I find out what the truth is. I stand on the truth, stand with my face like flint. I stand with my spine straight. And it's like, this is what it is. I'm not going to be a jerk. I'm not going to beat you. But I'm going to stand and, you're going to throw rocks at me. Okay. You're going to beat me. Okay. You can't. And then over time, that's actually what you see many times folding to that. They realize, okay, I can't touch Matthias. Matthias is like, it's like the Himalayas. The wind is all over the place, snow's all over the place. Mountain's still there. The mountain is still there.
Right.
And when I see Matthias standing, and actually, Peter talks about this, that we always need to be prepared to give an answer. And it's this beautiful thing that as you're just doing life, eventually people say, okay, why are you not, why are you not just falling apart?
Yeah.
Well, you're right. All of this stinks, but my hope is in the bigger picture. And I know at the end of the day, that Jesus Christ is going to set all these things right. And I know at the end of the day, I'm on the winning team, and that's what I'm building for. So, I mean, those are some things that come to mind immediately. What would have been cool, when I drove up to Missouri a couple of weeks ago and I was listening to a lot of this, if you and I were driving together, we could have talked about this, firsthand. But I'm looking at everything that's going on here, and I'm going, yeah, that stinks. That stinks.
Yeah,
that stinks. Yeah, but let's push through this. We can push through this, and I just want to tell you guys out there, I get it. Somebody like Andrew Tate comes along and says, "Be a man. You can do this." Yeah, there's some truth in that. Nick Fuentes comes along and he says, "Hey, the government's lying to you." Yeah. The government's lying to you. Hey, this is bad. Yeah. And then the question is, okay, what? And, what do we do about it?
I've got an answer. So, we've talked about living for the long game. And not just eternally, but also here on earth, thinking about your kids, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and thinking, well, yes, there's things we can do as people here. We can do this or do that or, speak about things. But what ultimately drives back corruption and darkness is Jesus Christ.
It's the light.
It's the light. It's the light.
Yeah,
well, how do we?
The light. John chapter 1, the light came into the world and the darkness could not overcome it.
Right. So, how do we dispel that darkness more? Well, we obey the Great Commission by making disciples of the nations. I can't remember, obviously, I say this every single time I try to quote scripture, but, we're called to be the salt and light of the earth. Well,
Matthew 5, yeah.
Yeah, salt has that preserving effect.
I can't remember anything while we're recording right now.
It's the camera. But yeah, we're supposed to, we're called to be salt and light of the earth and called to go make more salt and light of the earth, So that ultimately is the big answer to, and how that works on a day-to-day basis or on an individualistic basis is, up to the Holy Spirit and how he works through each person. But, I have trust and hope in that. So I think ultimately that's why, there's a saying when people go down the rabbit hole and it's like, when you've gone down the rabbit hole far enough, it all leads to the same thing. And it's Jesus Christ. It's kind of like a big thing going on right now, like the conspiracy stuff. But yeah.
Well, and it's thinking about who we are, Matthias, and what are the gifts and abilities that God has given us. Okay. I am not smart enough to do politics. Maybe I think too slow, not fast enough or whatever, but ultimately that's not what God's called me to do. But how can I, as Steve Hinton, in addition to loving my wife, doing my vocational job, what can I do in the bigger picture?
Right.
Well, I've had a blog, kingdomology.com. Look it up, folks on the audience, kingdomology.com. I've had that for like 15 years.
Really?
And I actually haven't posted anything since Christmas, since I've been incredibly busy. But I remember talking to some of our elders one time and asking about that because it's always a tension. How much time do I put into the immediate church and then the ripple effects around the church and all these sort of things? And one of the elders made the comment that the ultimate commission is to make disciples. He said, Steve, when you write something and put it on the blog that is helping people follow Jesus, that's helping people become disciples.
Right.
So you've got a guy who's thinking, hey, I want to do something. So, okay, what are you gifted to do?
Yeah. We talked about this last week too. Yeah. What are you gifted in?
What are you gifted to do? What do you like doing? Why are you doing it? Is Nick doing this to be a truth teller? I kind of wonder because he only tells the truth he wants to tell. And I can't do that. I mean, I can't judge his motives. I don't know. But we have to look at our motives. Maybe we're doing it because we've got a brokenness inside of us and we want the affirmation. Okay. We need to get that addressed, find some healing. Maybe we're doing it because we want to control.
Yeah. Maybe
we're doing it because we want to win an argument. Or are we doing this because we want to bring hope into the world? So finding what if someone is a good civil engineer, Well, they get out there, they design the best bridges. They do their job for the glory of God. So we're looking at issues. How do I bring salt and light in the world? I find my gift and my ability, and then I do it to help others.
Yeah.
So
do it for the glory of God.
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate answer.
Yeah. Practical application, practical challenge. We said from the get-go that, Matthias, this is not a Christian podcast.
Right.
Okay. It's kind of like America. People debate this. Are we a Christian nation? Or are we not? Mm. Well, on one hand, we are not a Christian nation in the sense that Saudi Arabia is a Islamic state, as Israel is a Jewish state. Okay. But you cannot deny the roots of American history.
Right.
Yes, there were people who came to places like Georgia to make money. I get that. But you look at the worldview of the founding fathers. You look at the pilgrims who are wanting a place of religious freedom. It is there, and that shaped the culture. And I'm circling back to some of the discussions that gets Nick all riled up. But with our podcast, we are not categorized as a Christian podcast. But it should be clear by now that we're coming at this from a biblical worldview.
Right.
How do I know I have purpose? How do I know I have an identity? Okay. If we're merely the byproducts of chance evolution, dude, just be honest. There is no purpose.
There's no purpose.
There isn't. Yeah. Just be intellectually honest. It's might makes right. Okay. All that to say is challenge. Guys, I want to challenge you today. Before Sunday comes, find a solid Christian church in your area. Obviously, we've got a lot of listeners here in Houston and Cypress. We're on the northwest side of Houston, Cypress Crossings Christian Church. Look it up and come visit. But the connection point is, how do I want to grow as a man? How do I learn to handle these issues? Part of it is you want to be by older godly men. So I want to challenge you, find a church that's near you. Look online. Do they believe the Bible is the Word of God? Do they believe that Jesus is the divine Son of God and rose again? And you can start looking at deeper theology after that. But wherever you're at, even those who are listening from the UK or Europe, I'm looking at the numbers now. We've got some listeners from Asia and Australia as well. Find a church. First challenge: find a church near you that believes these foundational issues. Just show up.
Yeah.
On Sunday, just show up. The little bit bigger challenge is begin reading the book of Proverbs. You mentioned that the book of Proverbs earlier, Matthias. 31 chapters. Obviously, you can't do this in February, but for March, you got 31 days.
Is it January?
Yeah.
Yeah, 31 days of March.
31 days of March. And just, you don't know where to begin in the Bible, that would be a challenge. Just begin, March 1st, chapter 1, because in that there is so much wisdom, which if we would just implement that in our lives, that would eliminate so much headache. Yeah. So, wow, Matthias, I don't know where this thing's going to go.
Yeah.
It was fun just talking. I felt like I did maybe way more talking this time.
That's okay. I did most of the talking last time.
Well, I may have talked more this time. And, But we want to hear from the audience, especially if there are some things where I didn't get it right. Send us an email. What is it? The
manidentity at gmail.com.
Manidentity@gmail.com, and we really want to get that. There are places to make comments and questions on YouTube.
Yep.
And Matthias, kudos, shout out. You are building that up very well.
Trying.
Yeah, and I noticed that we had a comment on one of the shorts that you did the other day. So thank you for all that. Well, we're going to be looking at this book in a couple of weeks, which will tie into this. Looking forward to some of the interviews that we've got lined up. We're going to be talking about trauma and how that affects us. And I'm just really excited about some of the discussions that we've got lined up. So, men, I hope that there was something here that was helpful. Be strong.
Be strong.